This is a thunderegg, and so is this, and these. Each specimen may exhibit wildly different colors, interiors, and minerals, yet they're all the same thing. This thunderegg from Crowley Ranch has bumps on the outside the size of this thunderegg from Quartz Creek. So are these also thundereggs? Maybe. And maybe there are more thundereggs inside this thunderegg. Eggs inside eggs inside eggs, which, yes, is a thing. It's thundereggs all the way down.
A thunderegg to me is a nodule of sorts that has, been over a period of time been filled up with various minerals and stuff on the inside.
I clearly have the assumption that we are talking about some sort of agate also, because a lot of thundereggs they do contain the agate part as well.
And it came out of a rhyolite flow, right? It's going to be a gas, the filled gas bubble of a rhyolite flow, maybe a volcanic ash tuff flow.
These really sticky lavas, and the gases end up forming these giant cavities that are filled with all of these different minerals that come out of solution kind of during the cooling process and after. And they're always fun to find when you're out in the field.
The fun of having been able to go out and dig for the eggs themselves where they're found, or the beds that they're in. And I think of the excitement of kind of opening something and not knowing what's going to be inside, because you never know whether you got a good one or a dud till you cut it.
Ready? Oh, look at that. We have a little bit of common opal, a little bit moss, chalcedony. That's actually really nice. That was a good cut. Yeah, that was a really good cut. So yeah, you never know what you're gonna get on the inside. Oh, man, that's a really nice egg.
The thunderegg name is actually used all over the world.
We use the literal translation of thunderegg, which translates to Donna Eye, which is actually the direct literal translation. But I think that's just with the name that actually came from the US with the history from Oregon.
In the 20s and 30s, if not before. And apparently somebody made up, or the Indians actually had kind of a saying for it, but there became a legend, which I don't know that it's really a true legend.
It's marketing. It would be the same as if you pick any form of jasper and now you applied a trade name to it. The whole stories that were ran in the past, we now know are just not real. There's no actual Native American legend that referred to them. That was an entirely fabricated thing.
The thunder gods of Mount Hood and Mount Jefferson got mad at each other and were taking the eggs out of the thunderbird nests and throwing them at each other. And that created all these eggs laying around the bases of the mountains from the Indian legend. And so that's the name of the thunderegg, because it was the thunderbirds' nests. It became a marketing tool at Richardson's Ranch and a few other places, and it stuck.
If you think about that period of time, right, people were extremely fascinated with Native American culture, and they were looking for ways to promote whatever. If we can connect it to Native Americans, we can promote that in things like Lapidary Journal, Desert Magazine, right? These are easy things that we can sell. It's hard to sell, a thunderegg without that name, right? It's a very good name. I will give them that. That's a good name for it.
We also have a much more scientific name that we call lithophyse. So it's just I think the Latin kind of name for this formation.
Thundereggs is a common name, right? Do we want to just go with lithophysi? We could just do that from here on out. I would find that acceptable.
And sometimes they're also just called Rhyolitkugel, which translates to rhyolite ball, so it's also just kind of a literal translation of what they are. So different names exist, but I would say the most common is definitely thunderegg.
I think it's important to set some ground rules for how we communicate about rocks and minerals, because that allows us to be on the exact same page. if I'm saying one thing, those words mean something. And you, the listener, hearing it, it should be able to paint a picture in your mind. But if there's confusion amongst it, well, I'm saying one thing, you're thinking another thing.
Thunderegg forms in rhyolite, and it forms as a nodule with a core. And the core can either be empty, have just a little bit of agate in it, can have fortification agate or jasper.
The biggest misconception that I come across is thundereggs are solid and anything with a hollow cavity is a geode. And I think we could just kind of dispel that entirely. Uh, you know, thundereggs are defined by what they come out of, not what is inside them. Because, if you have, based upon the other way of looking at it, if you have a double thunderegg and one side is hollow and the other side is, filled with waterline agate, which one would it be? It doesn't work. Yeah. Thundereggs come out of rhyolite for the most part. That's the simplest explanation, regardless of what is inside it.
Pyroclastic flows being a mix of ash and gas and things like that, as it starts to solidify and cool and starts to weigh down its own weight, it'll start to become welded, which just means like all of the individual particles are now starting to compress and to lithify and turn into like an actual rock. And while it's going from really high temperature to sort of cooling down, some of those gases end up finding just pockets. And so, so it'll be it's kind of like an emplacement product. So as it's cooling, it's going to form these big cavities of where the gases are sort of like collecting.
When it's cooling down, it ruptures open, and that's what's kind of leaving the hollow space inside. But if there's no silica fluid of any sorts that's not entering the cavity, then there will be just an empty space. So there's no crystallization that's either crystalline or macrocrystalline. So neither quartz crystals or calcite or agate or jasper. I think those are all the things that I just listed that can be found in thundereggs. And opal, actually, looking at Ethiopia, you find the precious opal can also be found in thundereggs, and common opal. Yeah.
As far as I know, there's no hard rules as to what can be found in a thunderegg, but a lot of it is silica based.
Jasper, agate, there are all kinds of forms of chalcedony or microcrystalline quartz. It ends up having like a cloudier form to it, or you get those really cool bands, because a lot of them are forms that are either microcrystalline and or they're hydrated. So it's like quartz with like a water molecule like attached to its structure. And so opal is a really good example of that.
I saw a thunderegg that was nothing but precious opal that came out of Spencer, Idaho, but it seemed like it was kind of a one-off, and it's not for sale. Though I really, really wanted it.
Zeolites. Yeah, I mean, there could be all kinds of stuff, right? Like there could be quartz crystals, there can be different agate, it could be waterlined, it could be fortified. There's thundereggs with calcite in them. I'm sure I'm forgetting plenty of things, but all kinds of different stuff can grow within them, because that's effectively what it is. It's a void. And where there's void, you can have crystal growth or deposition of other minerals.
I've seen agate, chalcedony, jasper, opal. I've even seen, on a rare occasion, calcite, or like some kind of like calcite-esque mineral.
Some of the agates have inclusions, tubes that run up through them that got some mineralization in. You can have color shifts, blue agate, white agate, red agate. You can have crystals that have formed in the center of the pocket. Just about anything that agate can form in any pocket, it can form in a thunderegg.
If that environment had a decent amount of copper and iron, it might form like blue agate, for example. Any of those trace elements can just make its way into the crystal structure and form all the cool variations that you see.
Silicon and rich liquids percolated into that void. It starts kind of the outside, and then eventually over time, then more liquid comes in and kind of percolates down and filling the void eventually. And, sometimes you can get, Thundereggs that don't have anything on the inside. They, be like this, where they're just kind of mostly empty. But then you have like Thundereggs that are like half filled, and it all depends on, where it was at in its growth process.
Where we see the position of the calderas today, like where they collapsed, is indicative of where the magma was stored. So that created this system where there was able to be eruptions and then some sort of void, and then they collapsed. And so an example of that would be like Castle Rock caldera that erupted the Dinner Creek tuff, and then there's the Prater Creek tuff, and there's the Cape Heart Lake caldera, which erupted the Rattlesnake tuff. So all of those, like if you looked at a map of Eastern Oregon, you would be able to know that there was a lot of magma being stored there at the time. And that was related to the Yellowstone hotspot.
Crust has been moving, so it erupted at one point in time at Richardson's, and then the things moved, and then it was down at McDermott. And it's possibly clear out now where Yellowstone is where the hot spot is. That may have been all the way as the mantle moved across the earth over that hot spot. It produced thunderegg beds from the Cascades to Yellowstone.
The stuff that's younger and throughout Eastern Oregon, especially Southeast Oregon, and like South Central to Southern Oregon is going to be like the high lava plains, and that's also bimodal volcanism. 12 million years ago to about like 7 million is kind of a combination of the extension that's acting on an area that was influenced by the older volcanism of the Columbia River Basalt Province, and then this chain of younging volcanism that goes towards Newberry caldera. It gets younger to the northwest, is basically like extension related. So all of that is to say, like the thundereggs that you see in like far southeast Oregon, so near like the Idaho border, those are near like Mahogany Mountain area. Those are related to the Sucker Creek rhyolite. And then if you're talking about the ones that are kind of like just northeast of Madras and the Richardson area that you were talking about, the Pride one, those are related to the John Day formations. I know it was long-winded, but those are all related to different caldera eruptions at different times. This is a good example of an ash flow tuff. So you can see all the ash shards and the pumice pieces and little rock fragments and stuff. If you were able to look closely at this, it's slightly glassy. So this is an example of one that's not really glassy. It's kind of more like a powdery look. And then this one, it's getting more welded, which just means it's like more heat and pressure on top of it. And then there's a process called devitrification, which means it goes from glassy to now they're starting to form crystals. The atoms are starting to create like a lattice structure. And spherulites can sometimes create a network of needle-like crystals. Sometimes that can be what pushes these apart, like what creates some of these voids, but most of the time it's voids that as something is cooling, it's creating this like collection of gas in the middle. In that process, like this, they're called lithophysi. So these are like little lithophysi.
This is a Skull Springs thunderegg. They have the Ritter matrix, and they have these fans that go out, as you can see these to the edge. And Skull Springs is over in Eastern Oregon, and it's a long ways driving in to get to it. But it's got some banding and some open pockets. And it's, as you can see, pretty big.
Big thundereggs, little thundereggs, size doesn't matter. They're still thundereggs. They can be solid rhyolite, hollow, filled, or somewhere in between. It seems like a broad enough group to be a simple story, but there's something about thundereggs that always kind of bothered me. Sure, yeah, rhyolite lava or ash flow tuff has water that boils off into gas to create voids. But this tuff has a void that isn't a thunderegg, so clearly not all gas becomes lithophysae. And basalt also has gas bubbles, but it forms vesicles. Clean, round, or ovoid vesicles that get filled in with agate and other minerals. Cut them and they look like this. Nothing but agate. When they weather out, they generally weather out as, just the agate. Why then is the rhyolite matrix such an integral part of the thunderegg shape? Why weren't the gas pockets just round like this? Or why don't they weather out like this?
Some thunderegg localities, the rhyolite is all gone and you get to see just the core that was left in it.
The core can be a biconid core where it's like two china hats put together. And so you would cut it this way and have kind of a diamond shape. Or there's the box cores. These are cores that have weathered out and all of the rhyolite egg has come off of it. And collected them just to be able to show how that core works. And then when you cut it, you have the design like this. Richardson's blue bed, 100% pretty much, or 99% of them are going to have the box core. If you go over to Fallen Tree and Killer Green, they're almost all going to be the biconid cores. So every location has a predominant choice on what type of core it is, and it's almost, that bed is going to be almost the same all the way through.
It's probably more controlled by the rhyolite.
It's something in the rhyolite or something in the formation. What the temperature was, I don't know, because I'm not really a scientist into that. I'm just a rock hound.
I have a particular fondness for thunderegg cores, and so for those that don't know what a core is, that is where the rhyolite caps had fallen off, exposing just the core. Whenever I find those, I typically heat them because it's unique. And back in the early days of my YouTube channel, I try to freeze and thaw thundereggs to get the rhyolite caps to pop off, exposing just the cores. And so I love the cores if I can find them.
If you're looking through the box core, you would want to cut it this way. If you cut it this way, you're just going to get one piece in there. And actually, even on the biconid core, if you cut it through here, you're going to get just one layer of the agate. And if you think about it, the agate laid down is kind of a sedimentary process. So it's going to have layers from top to bottom, or sometimes from, if it's fortification, it's going to fill the whole cavity once and then fill it in until it gets to the center.
You don't know what's going to be on the inside. Like, it can be nothing, it could be something. There could be a lot of duds, which, because like thundereggs can vary in size. They can be, about that big, but they can also be like massive. But yeah, it's really cool to be able to cut a thunderegg and be like, all right, what are we gonna get? Because the one that we cut yesterday had like a lot of stuff going on the inside of it, and if we had cut it the wrong way, a different way, actually, I don't want to say wrong way. If we had cut it a different way, we would have gotten a complete different pattern, and we wouldn't have gotten that same effect.
You want to look for, on the outside, if you can see the ridges, you want to orientate that egg in the saw so that you're cutting through what you think is where the most agate is going to show. So if it looks like the agate was from here to here, you're going to want to go through this direction. If you go through this direction, you're going to get just one layer. So you might end up, if you can get it top to bottom, you're going to get something like this. But if you accidentally cut it this way, you might just get one white line because you went right through here and got white on both sides and never saw any of the blue. And that just takes some practice of trying to learn. And you're going to cut some wrong, and you're going to cut some right and go, oh, okay, now I get it.
A lot of people that collect thundereggs will mark the top with a Sharpie. We'll put like a little Sharpie dot right on the top so that you can use that information later on to orientate your cuts. Or it's also kind of important to kind of know some information about how that bed has the current state of the bed of Thundereggs that you're mining or whatever. Are we talking about something that is horizontal or has it tilted? Now, if that tilted after the formation of the Thundereggs, well, now the top is up here. So like you need to mark them appropriately so that you can orientate it in the saw later on.
Friends' eggs tend to be squashed, not real round. You can cut them for the largest face because they don't have waterline agate. They don't have the water level in them. So you're not going to cut that the wrong way. They also, you can see some of the pressure ridges and you can tell where the agate sits in there. So they're kind of unique that you just cut them for the largest face you can get.
And sometimes you get a face. Some of the eggs, besides the pressure ridges, you can see little striations across the outside of the egg in all one direction. And that's called flow banding. And that means that that egg was sitting with those flow bands horizontal to the up and down. You cut perpendicular to those flow bands, you're going to get the most option, the better chance of showing any agate formation when you cut it, instead of cutting right through just one layer of the same agate.
Well, when in doubt, try and find flow banding. Sometimes it's hard to see. You can see it really well right there.
Mm-hmm. Whereabouts is this one from?
This is from Secret Ridge over by Burns.
There's more flow banding. And when you turn it around, that's what you got.
When you come across some exceptional pieces that also kind of show the interesting geologic features of their production, like when you perfectly line up a cut so that you see the entry point, right? When you get a perfect entry point cut, that's really nice.
A little bit similar approach to agates, I would always cut in an angle where you have the most perpendicular way of cutting towards the banding of the agate inside. So I would not cut directly on a ridge line, because then the banding is going to look very shallow. So the deeper of a opposing cut that I have towards the agate banding, the stronger the banding is going to look, and the better the banding will be inside. So I would cut exactly at the points in between two ridge lines. So let's say these two knuckles here are the ridge lines that I can see from the outside. Then I would cut in between of those.
If you're cutting Thundereggs, if you want to have a really good polish, you really want to use either an oil saw or use a saw that has a auto feed option. That way it cuts super slow. You get a nice finish every single time. With the Thunderegg that we cut yesterday, even though I sanded it, there's still a little bit underneath that surface of where the rock got too hot in the saw. Even though I wasn't pushing on very hard, I went as slow as I could without going too slow because of time constraints. But you still get a lot of heat fractures in the stone. So yeah, these water saws are great for cutting rocks and getting people into it, but they also have to take into consideration that you're going to have more work during the sanding process to get a really good polish.
The way you cut and polish something, and some of these Thundereggs, they're like a ball. Like there's no nice flat sides to cut on. And the thing that I found challenging as I learned how to cut Thundereggs was getting a dead center cut. Because a Thunderegg that's like the halves are 60-40, like I can't stand that. They need to be like a 50-50, right? You have to have a slab saw. You have to have a auto feed oil-based lapidary slab saw, and you're going to need some kind of special fixture that can do an offset clamping on it and hold that thing secure. You need it set up so that one side will fall off when being cut and both sides are not being held. So imagine you're cutting through a ball. If you're holding both sides of that ball, you can get pinching. And then what happens when it cuts all the way through? You're going to have one side dragging or bouncing across on the blade before the saw stops. So if you really want to do this and cut them really, really nice, you kind of have to hold one side and let the other side drop off in some way.
Good starter is going to be a good saw with a proper lapidary blade. There's people that have used tile saws to cut stuff, but you gotta kind of keep in mind that's kind of really not those aren't really what they're meant for. But a good lapidary machine with proper lapidary blades to cut them in half, or you can reach out to have someone else cut it for you, so you don't have to deal with the mess and the space that it takes up for a saw, and then some kind of way to sand it. There's different machines out there that you can sand them. We used a high-speed sander yesterday, and that's pretty efficient for most Thundereggs. Certain ones that you don't really want to use it on is like the common noble ones, because they can get too hot and fracture and stuff.
High-speed sanding, it's basically silicon carbide discs. You go up through the grits, and maybe around 800, you stop. You switch to a cerium oxide on a slow speed buffing wheel, and push that thing into it. And I would say that is like the key to it, right? Because there's a lot of ways that you can polish things, but when we're talking about something that's like this big, right, and you want it to be dead flat, well, you have limited options. Like you're not using a cab machine. Most people don't have gigantic flat laps. So this is kind of the process that other people have developed, and I've kind of adopted for myself, that has worked exceptionally well over time.
There's some people like me that I use cab machines typically for smaller Thundereggs, so long as I can get them to fit on the wheel. There's people out there that even use the angle grinders with the special discs. That way they don't have to deal with like big machines and a way to store them. My preferred machine for sanding Thundereggs is typically my Expando belt machine, which is, I forgot the name of the brand, but it's an older machine, and I typically use that for Thundereggs. I do have a high-speed sander. It is fast, but it's also one of the most, I would say, dangerous machines that I have in the shop, because if you're not careful with your thumb or finger placement, it can give you a pretty nasty paper cut for a little while. But it does work things a lot quicker than a Expando wheel sanding machine would do. It's just scary.
I cut some Polish Thundereggs actually in one of my earliest YouTube videos. I've cut some here and there, but they just don't excite me as much as most other agates, because typically you have to cut so many more to get one that is like pretty full with banding and as exciting in colors as the other type of agates I'm cutting. So I'm mostly cutting for aesthetics, and I'm getting much more excited about Malawi or Moroccan or Mexican agates, for example, than cutting Thundereggs.
Thundereggs usually won't break your pocketbook. You could get eggs for a couple dollars a pound to cut. You can get eggs at the shows that are already cut from anywhere from $5 to $10 to $15, $20 and have some really nice eggs. There are some out there that go for more than that, unusual locations or large ones, versus some of the other things that people collect, the Moroccan agates or whatever else, where you got to add zeros to all of those numbers. So it's kind of a nice starting point for somebody that doesn't know what they want to do yet, or like we've stayed pretty much with it for 25 years.
It's a more geological aspect that goes into appreciating them, but in terms of aesthetics and high value product, they are seen as a lesser product than agates that form in a basaltic host rock. That's my take on that.
It's chalcedony, it's agate. And also, I think it also depends on if the area is closed down or not. Will depend if it's valuable, because sometimes, like this one, this is a Buchanan Thunderegg, and this area's been closed down.
A high value Thunderegg agate is maybe in a range of $100 or $200 per half. It's a really nice one in a decent size, maybe 4 or 5 inches. But an agate in the same size that is very high quality can go for, if it's a very good piece, for several thousand for, the highest end, specimens.
If I have Thundereggs out back, I'll just auction it off, because sometimes I don't know what's worth. It might be worth $5 to you, it might be worth $50 to somebody else. I've sold Thundereggs that I thought were like pretty ugly. They were just solid on the inside, like there was nothing to it. They're pretty mossy, but the moss is so, the moss is so thick that it's like, it's not that great looking. But someone else has loved it. But I have a hard time pricing it. Like typically, like most generic Thundereggs can range anywhere between $10 to $25 for about that size, give or take. But again, it all depends on how pretty it is, how many water lines it has. Like the variations, it's all over the place. It's hard to say exactly like an exact price point.
Thundereggs, they can also be hollow or they can be a druzy. So I think it's not the terminology of a thunderegg or having an agate filling, but I think that's exactly what makes it interesting for collectors that appreciate pretty rocks.
Late 90s, we started getting into rock hounding, and like most people that started in rock hounds back then, one of the places you went was Richardson's Ranch. And we went out and got into the thunderegg beds and were digging. And it was reasonably priced. It was easy to dig. There was places to go. There was other field trips. They weren't high priced at the shows. They were almost like an entry drug to rocks. You could start here, have fun, and do it. The family, we brought the kids along at that when they were home then. They're now grown, and we've taken grandkids out, so it can become a good family experience.
And I usually think of the Pacific Northwest because, well, Oregon having some of the most notable thunderegg localities, that's the one that gets a lot of attention. I know there's thundereggs in Australia, there's thundereggs in Germany, there's thundereggs in Japan, but I don't know anything about them. There's also the language barrier. Not with Australia, but the other two.
Germany and Europe actually has a lot of different thunderegg locations, and I feel like that's also what a lot of the German collecting community is about. So a lot of collectors that had access to those thunderegg locations 20, 30 years ago, those are the ones that are still passionate about collecting. And actually, going back to some of the most aesthetic locations, I would also put the German location St. Egidian at the top of the list for producing some of the most beautiful thunderegg agates. They very often have a beautiful star-shaped pattern, and sometimes the kind of atoll that forms around the very core, where you have like an extra kind of ring around it. However, with German agates in general, it is that unfortunately that most locations produce very fractured agates. So having fracture-free pieces, like they're the most desired and hold the highest value, are pretty rare. But Germany itself has several locations. So most famously, the St. Egidian location in Saxony, which is just about an hour away from where I live currently. Then this same location has various different outcrops in the same region that have different, sub-locality names. But they also change their features. So a few kilometers away from the St. Egidian location, there's, for example, Hohenstein-Ernsthal, which is the same formation, but it has entirely different features. So in the Hohenstein-Ernsthal location, you find much more stacked water level banding, and sometimes you also find plume formations, which you both don't find at the St. Egidian location. So even a small distance can very much change the appearance of the thundereggs. Then we have the Polish thundereggs, which are also very well known. They are from Nowy Kościoł, which translates to New Church. It's just the name of the small village that is in that area, and that location is still accessible for collecting. However, in Germany, it's very difficult because most places are restricted or on private property. So in Germany, the collecting tradition is not as active anymore and has turned a little bit more into a gray or a black zone where people sometimes also go out without having permission. But there is much more locations in Germany that also produce thundereggs. For example, the Gröppendorf thundereggs, which have a color change of secondary influence, and they're all kind of gray and white and lost their original color because of secondary deposition they've lived through. But there's also thundereggs in Bulgaria, in Slovenia, in Romania, a lot of different places in Europe that did produce thundereggs. And France.
Utah, Oregon, Washington,
Canada, Mexico, Turkey,
Nevada, California, New Mexico, and foreign ones that we've gotten.
I mean, you got thundereggs that are literally all over the place. I don't have some of those thundereggs. I mean, I got a couple from Australia, but I don't have any from Canada to really, to have a good comparison. But personally, I think all the good thundereggs come out of Oregon. I think Oregon has some of the best thundereggs in the world. Though again, I'm biased. Oregon, born and raised. The Oregon state rock is the thunderegg. But I think Oregon has a very wide variety of like what you can find, and I think that kind of puts Oregon on the map as far as like the best thundereggs.
Oregon is such a good place for thundereggs because the whole eastern half of the state, or more than half of it, if you think about it, basically east of the Cascades, is just a gigantic history of millions and millions of years of volcanism. And so we have all the different, it has a history of bimodal volcanism. So what that means is just in the compositional spectrum, you've got basalts and you've got rhyolites and just a little bit less of the intermediate stuff in between. And those rhyolite flows and ash flow tufts, ash flow tufts coming from the collapse of calderas, that's happened throughout a lot of the last 17 million years throughout Eastern Oregon. And so that created lots and lots of layers of all of these different types of what you would need to make these, which is like high silica stuff. So like flows and tufts. And then on top of that, ash flow tufts tend to just be very voluminous. So you're getting a whole lot of it. It's not just like you're getting a little thin layer of something. Like these are giant calderas that are filling up with like hundreds and hundreds of feet of tufts. So you get that sort of like compression that you need and all those gases that sort of are getting like trapped in place. And then the other part of it is that this area is still really volcanically active. So there's a lot of magnetism still going on underground that would be supplying the heat, not just back then, so like, obviously when it was volcanically active, but also like today, you have areas like Klamath Falls that are operating a lot on like geothermal energy because there's still all this heat being supplied, which means there's still fluids running through these rocks because of all the faulting that's still going on. So it just has like all the different components in abundance in this area.
We were lucky enough to be able to collect at Richardson's quite a bit, before they closed to going out and digging. My husband has been one of the field trip leaders for the Prineville Powwow, and they take field trips out to thunderegg locations and actually have purchased and set up owning claims for a couple of thunderegg beds in the area that they use for taking people out on field trips during the powwows in June. There's some private ranches that they've had available, but there's also, areas up in the Ochoco Mountains that you can go on foot. Whistler has been an area that's set aside for amateur rockhounds. The McDermott area has got access points that you could go down and dig thundereggs there pretty easily. And that's, the couple of major ones in Oregon. There's some other locations that's a little harder to get to, or it's on private land and it's a little, goes in and out of being available.
Anytime there's an area where there was a bunch of different lava flows interacting with each other, kind of like older ones. So, and where there's that hydrothermal alteration that I was talking about with like faulting and fluids. So there's actually an area called Star Mountain out in Eastern Oregon. It's near a little town called Crowley. It's pretty hard to get to, and it's very remote. So if anybody's going to visit, be like very prepared with water and a good vehicle and stuff like that. And some of it is private property, but what's around in certain areas is BLM land, and you can just hike around and come across, if you start walking around and seeing little chips of some of this stuff anywhere, like some of this, even the stuff that doesn't look so pretty, and you notice that you're in a saddle, chances are there's a fault there. So you might actually, if you're near something mapped as a rhyolite, you might find some really cool stuff.
There are other areas on BLM land where you can go. The only thing is, if you went to Richardson's and you dug and cut and polished, you can actually sell it. Whereas if it's on BLM land, you collect it, you can't sell it. It's, so you can go to Whistler Springs, collect thundereggs, which I've gone there at least once, and it's hard work, but you can get some pretty cool thundereggs out of there. I still have a container somewhere of it just because it was fun.
We hit a lot of the more popular thunderegg locations in Oregon, and then spent plenty of time at some of the less known ones in Washington, primarily the lily pad thunderegg bed, which is little tiny thundereggs, but they're incredibly detailed on the inside when they're cut and polished. Like, they're absolutely gorgeous, and some of my favorites, but they rarely get bigger than maybe an inch or two in size, most being in the 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. And then Rimrock Lake, which is another location up in Washington. And I particularly like the Rimrock Lake ones because so many of them are terrible, right? And when you have a location where so many of the thundereggs are unappealing when they're cut, well, when you get one that is appealing, it feels like extra good, right? Like, you threw 20 away and now you got one good one, though.
So this is the Mahogany Mountain quadrangle, the 30 by 60 minute quad. This was done by the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, or DOGAMI, in 1993. And so earlier I had mentioned Star Mountain and the Crowley area. That's right here. So you're kind of coming in off the highway this way, and then you have to drive up for a little while through the Barren Valley. And if you want any sort of reference to where we are, we're right near the Idaho border. So we're like way over there. So this would be the area that has a lot of the older rhyolites associated with the Columbia River basalts. Like this whole area right here is the Mahogany Mountain caldera. And this is what hosts the Sucker Creek tuff that's up in here. And so this is like where Jordan Craters is. Some people are familiar with that. All these faults that are in here, this is what I was talking about when I was saying that there's not a lot of surface expression of these faults, so we're not seeing like a big, superficial offset. It's the same unit on either side, so we're not seeing like an age difference or a rock type difference. In these saddles here, an example where the fault was mapped because people saw evidence of hydrothermal activity. So this would be a good area, for example, where someone could look and possibly find thundereggs because of that sort of secondary emplacement of those fluids in the cavities. And then all these blue polygons here, like Saddle Butte, and these here are little rhyolite domes. So these are also examples of ones that could have, like if you can see all the faults that go through there, hydrothermal fluids can travel through those, which is really nice for thunderegg searching.
Well, we've found, or actually I haven't, my husband has found some spots in the Ochoco Mountains where there hasn't been digging, and he dug and found thundereggs. One of the old timers kind of said early on, the Ochoco Mountains, it's a big caldera, and thundereggs are always found, are only found in rhyolitic calderas, where every hole or every different slightly different location in that several square miles gets the dignity of its own name. So there's maybe 20 or 30 different named beds up there in the Ochoco Mountains that have different names. They're far enough apart from each other in the flows that they do have some different looks. Some of them are larger and some areas are smaller. Some of them have slightly greener matrix and some are browner matrix, and so there is differences even in the same general area. Richardson's, there's the blue bed and the red bed. This is a blue bed egg. And they usually have blues and grays and whatever. The red bed has more reddish color in the agate, and they're not very far apart. But it's all down to whatever chemistry was happening in the flows and where different chemicals are in the rhyolite that leaches out into the agate as it forms.
Just looking at this one here, the one that's on the cover is from France. So, there is good pieces from a lot of different locations, but looking at a broader picture of where more high quality is concentrating on, then I would absolutely go to the Baker Ranch location in New Mexico. I think just the color intensity there is, also the variety in colors. I mean, there were times where you could practically find any color. In the more last years of mining, it was predominantly colors of like red and black and white. Back in the day, you could also find more green, you could find blue, you could find yellow. So, I mean, every location is like changing quickly with, the different types of mineralization that we're able to get into those hollow spaces. But I think Baker Ranch is absolutely up there. I think the Thundereggs from China, the Pujiang, and also the Thundereggs found at Huanhua. There's a small Thunderegg location that's found directly next to the Fighting Blood agates. I think they can also be very nice. Yeah, so there's the German book that I just dipped in a few minutes before the interview here. This was published by Dr. Peter Werner. It's a German book about rhyolites that was published in 2010.
Speaking of books, I have two books that are kind of my go-to for all things Thunderegg related. One's pretty specific, and the other one is kind of more broad, and that would be The Formation of Thundereggs by Robert Colburn. That kind of being like the definitive book on the subject as far as I'm concerned. And then a more regional book, if I can show this, we have Oregon Thundereggs by Janice. This is an excellent book, right? Like, obviously, it only covers one state, but it's also just a great read if you're interested in Thundereggs.
We have self-published it, so I'm selling it directly. The book has its own email, jvcrockbook25@gmail.com. It's $135. I can ship it anywhere in the U.S. for $10 more. It is just over 350 pages. It includes just over 650 different specimens. This book project came out of our starting out in the 90s and trying to find eggs, and we would go to shows, and there would be people that have a whole bunch of different eggs, and we'd ask them, well, where's this egg from? Oh, it's from Oregon. Yeah, but where? What bed? Where is it at? And a lot of people didn't know, so I started interviewing old timers and keeping my notes. Met a guy who had done research, and he shared info with him that he had with me, and kept all of that. And we learned, and my husband's particularly is good at being able to look at an egg and figure out where it came from. So then we knew where the beds were and what was there. People kept asking, well, how do you know? How do you know? What do you know? And in the back of my mind, I kept all this stuff and thought, well, we should do a book someday. Well, 2020 came along. I was semi-retired. Everybody was at home. My church started a writing group, and I said, this must be the sign to write the book. So it took about 4 years to figure out how to do it and go through all the 20 years of research and pull out the pieces that were there, get it written. And then after that point, took about a year to get the photographs and printed and in hand. And the neat thing about it is that it has some basic information about what a thunderegg is. And then for the different beds, there's history and story and an identification code. And then all kinds of pictures that you can look at and enjoy a first-class collection in a small area, or use as a guide to figure out where your eggs are from or find something that you might want to look for.
I didn't have the experience to ask the right questions of my guests to pick apart my rhyolite conundrum. but Dr. Swenton talking about spherulites and Jared's recommendation to read Robert Colburn's book really was eye-opening. Colburn, known as the Geo Kid, answered most of my nascent questions and made a strong case for ideas that were really only just starting to percolate in my brain box. Without getting into the weeds of Colburn's 493-page tome, I'll lay out a simplified way of what I think I understand about Thunderegg formation. While the rhyolite flow is still flowing, spherulites comprised of cristobalite needles start to crystallize. Cristobalite is a polymorph of quartz. These spherulites essentially stabilize the surrounding flow, preserving any flow banding or layers that the spherulite encompasses, although many of the flows are aphonetic. The core of the spherulite starts to grow and may distort these layers. This is also coupled with gas coalescing at these nucleation sites, which then take advantage of planes of weakness to exsolve and pop open the spherulites into cavities, or lithophysae. How much these cavities open depends on the water content and overburden pressure and probably some other things. It's the silica shell of cristobalite that preserves the round nature of Thundereggs via a crystallization front. Sometimes that crystallization front is ruptured and a new front is formed, creating what looks like eggs inside eggs. And sometimes other things happen.
So sometimes when an egg is forming and it expands, perlite, which is around the egg, perlite will fill inside and before the agate comes in. And then sometimes that perlite will even form little eggs. You can see a couple of little eggs in there that are forming within a perlite.
For more details and to explore the nuances of Thunderegg formation, I do highly recommend Colburn's book.
I high grade my Thundereggs. Even the ones that I've already finished, generally I want the best of the best or something in particularly interesting. I've cut a lot of Lucky Strike Thundereggs, being that they're some of my favorite. So, ones that don't make the cut, they will either get chucked outside or given away. That's usually the two. It's not as big as most people might think it is, seeing as how I've made all these videos and going to different Thunderegg localities. I just really want one of the best from everywhere, right? So I don't have a display case with 2,000 Thundereggs in it. I want my favorite from each locality, and there's so many localities that we haven't visited yet. So that's kind of, I'm always looking at the grass is always greener over there. You never know what could be there.
But yeah, I do have a decent collection of different Thundereggs kind of scattered all over, and I'm always collecting. So, if there's something unique enough, I'll add it to my collection. But, a lot of the stuff that I see every day, then, I'm more off to either sell or, pawn off to somebody else, because then I already have a lot of rocks. I've got a Thunderegg that I had gotten from someone in the community that I cut in half, and I put it for auction, and it sold. And then I immediately bought it back from the person that won the auction, because I thought it was cool. I haven't seen it before. Had to have it in my collection.
What we have kept as specimens for ourselves is probably around 5,000 to 6,000 eggs. 70,000 to 80,000 pounds still here to cut. But that's come later in years when we picked up a couple of states. One large one that was a friend of ours that unfortunately had to get out of rock hounding, and so we took his eggs, and that was probably half of what we've got out there. We have plenty to keep us busy for a while, but that doesn't seem to stop us from going out in nature and trying to find some more, because the thrill of the hunt is part of it too.
When I go out to Eastern Oregon and I'm finding them all over where there's faults, we do see them a lot, but we don't actually come across ones that are that pretty. We come across ones that are just like little chunks of, whatever. Nothing that would be quite as obvious or as cool as this, but when we do find something, we do take it back, and sometimes we'll hammer it open because it's fun. I have a small collection of them myself.
I have a double Lucky Strike Thunderegg that is really, really large, and it is absolutely gorgeous. It's like one of the best Thundereggs I have seen, and I love it. Has waterline agate, has interesting pluming that is black and blue. We have quartz crystals. There's different pockets of growth up in the upper egg. So you have a gradient of black and blue along with orange dendritic growth. And then add to that, you have the rhyolite kind of has like some pinkish hues to it. So pretty much at that contact zone between the agate and the rhyolite, there's like some fading pinks to it, and I think it's appealing. It's an interesting egg, and that was dug my first time going out to Lucky Strike, and I think it's a prime specimen.
This is a Polish thunderegg that I just got from a collection recently. So this is from the Nowy Kościoł location in Poland, and this was actually, I think the collector said he's had it in his collection since 1990. So that was about 35 years ago. And yeah, that collection, that place has also changed over time so much because they have been collectors digging for these stones for decades. So with the more you kind of rupture the landscape, the more the location has been searched for, and a lot of times I would say the prime times of a lot of these places are in the past, because they've had such a long history, and a lot of the best stones in I would say a lot of cases have already been dug up. Um, but sometimes new finds also happen, once you extend the location, or come into a new spot or a new outcrop of the same kind of rhyolite flow, and they might have an entirely different appearance. But yeah, with this one here specifically, like the colors in this one here, you wouldn't find in any of the newer finds that are made at this specific location. The flow of the rhyolite has been interrupted by the central core, like kind of cracking open and letting that silica fluid in and crystallize. The contrast in the banding, the color variety, then you have that beautiful crystal druzy inside of it, surrounded by a floater. And I think it's also interesting how the rhyolite, every single thunderegg location also has its specific features, for example, on how much the rhyolite has crystalline imprints of feldspar or quartz, or if it's like a very smooth kind of flow structure.
I like the thunderegg cores. It just, you get to see what they look like on the inside without cutting them open, so you can kind of get an idea of like, how big the core of it, if you were to cut it with the rhyolite, would have been, or the color of it. But I also like the water lines too, and like anything that's like really scenic. I'm also a huge fan of like color. I have a few that were red on the inside, like red, and I'm like, oh man. And so it was one of those things where I had it up for auction, and someone bought it for auction, and then gifted it back to me because they saw how much I loved it. And so it's actually on the shelf behind me. And it was a really nice gift from a member of the community. So I love very vibrant colors, water lines, and anything that's really picturesque. I have one, or actually, sorry, excuse me, I had one, and the person that bought it actually offered for if I ever wanted to buy it back, that I could. And I made a short on YouTube about it, but it looks like Patrick Starr with his pants down.
For me, only because my husband has been nice enough to get it for me in jewelry. My favorite is the Pridey Plume, which makes really gorgeous jewelry. And I can wear it. Whereas when you get the actual eggs, this is a small one, they take up a lot of space. And some of them, some of the eggs are this big around.
I don't think there's an objective best, right? I like Lucky Strike eggs, but like a beautiful Richardson's egg is gorgeous. There's Thundereggs from Eastern Oregon that are filled with zeolites, right? Like those are two different beasts, like one's going to be cut and polished. The other one you're going to like break a little window into and do it in a way, maybe upside down, hit it with a hammer so the little chip falls out, and then you can look inside it with a light and be like, oh, that's filled with crystals. I would say the lily pad thunderegg bed has the very best tiny thundereggs, right? Like if we're talking about thundereggs that are really, really good, that are sub 1 inch, that's the best in my opinion. Or the location out in Oregon that has zeolites in it. That would be probably the best zeolite filled thunderegg location.
I would say Richardson Ranch thundereggs are probably some of the most known in the entire world. Every collector in Germany who's collecting thundereggs or also agates, they've all heard about the Richardson Ranch thundereggs.
The most sought after thundereggs probably are the pridey plume, which is found on the Richardson's ranch. But they're sought after because that particular bed, maybe 10 to 12, 13, 14% of the eggs had a plume formation in them where there was a mineralization that the agate went around. And almost all of those, though, when they brought them out, they sliced them and made cabochons, and this is a pridey plume. And you've got this, what looks like to me, seaweed in an undersea garden of the blue water being the blue agate. And those are some of the most beautiful scenes in a thunderegg that I've ever seen, is the stuff that is from the pridey plume, which is on the Richardson's ranch.
The tools that you need can really vary a lot. It's so dependent on the actual location. Up on the Rimrock location, you're literally just picking them up off the shore of the reservoir. The lily pad location, it's kind of, they're loose in the dirt. You're going to want to have a screen and a shovel, maybe like a geo pick. But there's other locations like Lucky Strike where there's, the mine owners have been scraping at a rhyolite wall, and you're going at it with a hand sledge and chisels. So it's kind of really depends. Have it all, right? Like you need a rock hammer, you need a 2-pound sledge, chisels, gad bars, some screens, buckets, all the things.
I managed to go to Richardson's Rock Ranch once before they had closed down the public dig site, and I still have some of those thundereggs from that time. Some are out in the back pile, but there's other locations here in Oregon and also apparently up in Canada where you can get some thundereggs, and it's kind of been on my bucket list to go get some more and self-collect.
I mean, it's always fascinating to go to the places where you see the rocks from all the time, but then actually see it in person. And I think what surprised me the most is how high the saturation of thundereggs is in the rhyolite host rock, because rhyolite is a very, very slow kind of moving liquid when it is hot and comes out of the volcano, while compared to basalt is much more quick flowing and has a much lower percentage of bubbles in the magma. So with agates that are formed in volcanic in basaltic host rock, sometimes the gas bubbles are like a meter apart or like 3 feet apart from the next bubble. And in rhyolites, you literally have like one bubble baked next to the other one. And sometimes you have multiple bubbles, like 5 right next to each other. And I found it just incredible how high the saturation of thundereggs was in that host rock.
What if you have a tube, right? Like I have a thundereggs that are a long tube. Is that no longer a thunderegg now? I mean, what if in a rhyolite flow that was cooling, you had a shelf, right? And now you have a bubble coming up to it and it's flattening out. Does that qualify? I mean, there's so many things that we could, I don't know, get into the weeds on, I guess. I like thunder tubes though. One word, not two, no hyphen.
You've got an egg shape or an egg formed, and then there was another egg inside it, and they nest. It's kind of like nesting dolls.
Or like here, you've got 2 eggs within this one egg. How that forms, I don't know. But
Can I see the outside of one or both of those? Is it nothing real?
No, nothing
Special.
that tells you.
this one looks like it could be 3 or 4 different eggs. But that one looks like one egg.
The Hampton tuff that's in that area, which came from some of the older calderas that erupted like north of Bend and a little like northeast of Bend, that whole area has the tuff, which is kind of like the source of the high silica source that you need, and then all the faults that run through with the hydrothermal activity like allowed for all those to be created.
So this is what we call a slip egg. When this egg formed, something happened and part of it slipped and then it resealed up. Janice has a really good example of a slip egg.
If you're someone who's looking for a fault out in the field, like especially Eastern Oregon or anywhere really, you're looking for either like displacement, you know, like where there's something situated next to something else that shouldn't be, like there's a time difference in the rocks that are next to each other, or there's like a topographic expression of a fault somewhere, or, you know, the age is different or something like that. But out in Eastern Oregon, there are giant lava flows that are really thick, and sometimes because there's also been a lot of erosion, all the classic signs like, you know, like fault breccia or striations or topographic expression or all that is not there. And so what actually helps a lot with determining, like, is there actually a fault here, is when we see a bunch of thundereggs in the area. So there will be like a really gentle saddle or something where it's like, you know, it's barely perceptible out in the field. And then as you're walking across from one saddle to the other, you start to notice flakes of silica and like chalcedony, like churty looking things. And then you'll come across stuff that looks like this, and you're like, okay, this is an area where fluids had to have come up, and they had a path, right? They had a path to come up. So that's like my biggest experience with thundereggs is like, we know there's a fault here.
They're going to have some shape, whether it's, you know, from this size to this size, it's still all a separate nodule.
If this rock was originally geochemically analyzed, it would be, you know, 75% silica. If it gets silicified, what it means is that the water starts leaching away some of the other components that make it up. So it tends to leach away like calcium and potassium. If we were to analyze this, which could have originally looked something like this material, it could be like 85% silica. So it's not that you're increasing the amount of silica or in the surrounding rock, like all this stuff. It's just that you've removed all this other stuff. So now it's become this really dense, like high silica stuff, which from a volcanologist, igneous petrologist perspective, we kind of seen that as like that's like annoying for us because we're like geochemically we want to know what it was like when it was in place, right? So yeah, it's interesting. It's like an interesting perspective. Like once we see this, we're like, great, we know there's a fault there, but we can't sample here because it's not going to give us anything that's like particularly useful for what we're doing.
From my point of view as just a hobby collector and enjoying the beauty of the eggs, I just like to know what the different options are, that, you know, fortification or water line or various different things that the agate can do.